Hello and welcome, class 4 students. Today I will discuss the poem My Shadow of your first chapter. Before discussing, we should know the definition of shadow, how the shadow is formed. Actually, what happens when an object or a person comes in between the path of the source of light and the surface, then the shadow is formed. Here, the sun is the source of light and the ground is the surface, and the boy has come in between them, this path, and this dark object is formed, and this dark object is called shadow. You may have noticed your shadow also on the ground, on the wall of your house. Today we will discuss the fantasy, imagination, and merriment, enjoyment of a child in the company of a shadow, because the child don't understand the science behind the formation of a shadow. He just thinks that the shadow is a child like that of him, and hence he finds merriment and enjoyment with that shadow, and in this way he finds his pleasure and he keeps experimenting also. So, Shadow, the poem, was written by Robert Louis Stevenson. Who was Robert Louis Stevenson? He was a famous Scottish means he is from Scotland, Scottish novelist and travel writer. The poem was published in 1885. And the poem describes how the child is excited and fascinated by his own shadow. It also illustrates the pleasure and imagination of him that he get in ordinary things. He is amazed and surprised to see how the shadow gets taller, smaller, and sometimes becomes invisible. However, one day when he wakes up before sunrise, he cannot find the shadow becomes invisible. Why he thinks so? Because he don't know that in the morning there is no sunlight. That's why the shadow is not formed. He thinks simply that the shadow may have forgotten to wake up because he was feeling too sleepy. That's why he did not wake up. So let us discuss line by line analysis of the poem. I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me. Yeah, the first line. I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me. In and out with me means the shadow always goes with him, always follows him. Whenever the writer goes inside, the shadow follows him. Whenever the child goes outside, the shadow follows him. I have given a short summary of the poem also. You can memorize this. Let us see what the first line say. In this poem, a kid is describing the shadow. He is amazed to see wherever he goes, the shadow follows him. That means when he goes inside, the shadow comes with him inside. When he goes outside, the shadow alone comes with him. Now the child is saying, what can be the use of him? What can be the use of him? That means it has no use. What can be the use of him means the shadow has no use. Is more than I can see. That means the shadow has no use other than it is visible. He can see means it is visible. The shadow is only visible. No, the shadow cannot do anything, cannot do any work, cannot be helpful to the child. That's why the child is saying that it is of no use to him except it is visible. So I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. This is the first stanza. The shadow always accompanies him wherever he goes, always follows him, and the shadow has no use except it is visible to him. That is uh, the first stanza says. Now, come to the second stanza. He's very, very like me. He's very, very like me from hills up to the head. From hills up to the head. Hill means what? Hill means the lower backward part of foot under his ankle. You have seen your ankle where it is in the lower backward part of your foot. That is under your ankle. So this is called hill. He is very like me. That means he is similar. He is identical with me from heel to the head. That means from leg to his head, the shadow is totally identical. Why will it not be identical? Because it is the shadow of the child. But the child don't know. No, the child don't know behind how the shadow is formed. That's why he is saying the shadow is like him, just like him. He is identical from heels up to his head, from his leg, lower leg up to head. And what happens after that? I see him jump before me when I jump into bed. And what the shadow does? Shadow jumps before him. Whenever the child tries to jump into his bed, the shadow also does so. But the child says that he jumps before him. Why does the shadow jumps before him? It is simple logic, no? Light is faster than human beings. We cannot no travel fast than light. Light is faster thing in the world, and shadow is nothing but a light. So, but the child does not understand that. Child says that the shadow jumps faster than him. But why does the shadow jumps faster? Because it is light. So this is first and second stanza. How we will have to recite the poem? I have a little shadow that goes in and out with me, and what can be the use of him is more than I can see. He is very, very like me from the hills up to the head, and I see him jump before me when I jump into my bed. Okay, next come to the third stanza. The funniest thing about him is the way he likes to grow. What is the funniest thing about him? The process of his growth. The way in which the child grows is the most funniest thing about him. How does the child grow? Let us see what is so funny about this. Not like a proper children he grows. How does proper children grow? A proper children grows very slowly. It takes 1 minute. It takes 10 to 12 years to be grown up to be a man. It takes full total 10 to 15 years to get grown up to be a man. But the, the child sees that the shadow grows very fast. Sometimes he shoots up taller like an Indian rubber ball. Shoots up means grows very fast. Shoots up means grows very fast. Here I have written shoots up means grow very fast. How does the shadow grow? Like an Indian rubber ball. What does Indian rubber ball mean? High bouncing ball. Have you seen high bouncing ball? This. These are Indian rubber ball. You may have seen, no, you may have played with these Indian rubber balls. It bounces very high when it is let fall onto a surface. So, what is the funny about it? The way it grows. It is not like a proper children's growth. which sometimes is very slow and sometimes shoots up taller like an Indian rubber ball. Just like an Indian rubber ball shoots up very high, it also grows very fast. And sometimes it gets so little that there is none of him at all. And the child also observes that sometimes the shadow gets so little that it becomes invisible. There is none of him at all means it becomes invisible. It cannot be seen. So this is the growth of the child. How is the growth of a child? Sometimes it is very slow, sometimes it grows very fast, like an Indian rubber ball when it is let fallen, it jumps very high. In the same way, the shadow becomes very high. But the child does not understand the science behind it. When the source of light is moved here, direction of the light is moved up, down, the shadow size of the shadow change. But the child don't know the science behind it. He simply thinks that the shadow is like a child, and it also grows up like a child. But he cannot understand how can child become small, how can child become so big suddenly. So he is amazed. He is comparing this to an Indian rubber ball. So let us move to this next stanza. He hasn't got a notion how children ought to play. Hasn't got the notion. Notion means, I have written, notion means knowing something or having idea of something. He hasn't got a notion of how children ought to play. Ought to means should play. Whenever ought to is added instead of should, it means that it is more polite than should. Ought to play is expressed in more polite way than should. So, how the children ought to play, he doesn't know. The shadow does not know how the children ought to play, and in his ignorance, what does the shadow do to him? Can make a fool of me in every sort of way. The shadow does not know how to play. When the child plays, the child thinks that the shadow is also playing with him. But he can't play with the child because it is a shadow itself. But the child thinks that he don't know how to play. That's why shadow is behaving. Quite funny, no? He says, he stays so close me that he is a coward you can see. Whenever the child plays, no, the child is needs to be courageous and strong. But whenever the child plays, he stays very close with him. Have you seen anybody with your or anybody of your friends who stays close with you when you play cricket? No, no. But the shadow stays close with him, so that in this way and in for this reason, the child thinks that his shadow is so coward that he don't know how to play, and he is afraid of playing. He is comparing him to a nursery. Nursery means here. Nursery means a babysitter who takes care of the babies, little babies. Is called nursery. Now, in the next line, he compares him to a nursery and the shadow to be a baby. I would think same to stick to a nursery. Same means very disgusting feeling. Very disgusting. He thinks it's very disgusting to stick to a nursery. Nursery means he thinks himself to be a nursery as a shadow sticks to me. The shadow, whenever he goes, the shadow always sticks to him. Stick to him means here. Stays very closely attached. Who stays very closely attached? The shadow. With whom? With the boy. That's why he thinks that it is very disgusting that the shadow always stays closely attached with the boy. It is very simple. Now, one morning, what happens in the next stanza? One morning, very early, before the sun was up. That means the sun was not yet risen up. The sun was not yet up. The sunset was not, the sunrise was not happened yet. I rose and found shining dew on every buttercup. The child rose from the sleep, and the sun was not yet come out, found the shining dew on every buttercup. Buttercup means yellow flowers. Here, this is the buttercup. You can see I have given you the image. This is buttercup. So on every buttercup means on every yellow flowers. Buttercups actually is a flower which is grown on grasses. So the poet says that on every buttercups, that means on every grasses, on every leaves, he found dew. Dew means water that is fallen on grasses after in the night or after the night. We found these waters are called dews. So the child finds the dews on the leaves and on every grasses. But what happens to the shadow when the child sees dews on every buttercup? But my lazy little shadow, like an errant sleepy head. Errant means complete, totally here. Errant means complete here. Complete, totally. Totally sleepy head. Sleepy head means he was feeling very sleepy. That's why his head was dizzying. He was very very sleepy because of this reason he was not with the boy, and he had stayed at home behind him. Now at the time the shadow is not with him. The child thinks whenever when in the morning he wake up, the child sees that the shadow is not with him. The shadow always stays with him, but this time the shadow is not with him in the morning. But the child does not understand that the shadow is not formed actually. We know that the light source of light is needed. And how the shadow is formed? When the sunlight is up, when the sun is up on the sky. But in the morning there is no sun in the sky. That's why the shadow is not formed. But the child does not understand the scientific reason behind it. That's why he thinks that maybe the shadow is first asleep in his bed because he was feeling very very sleepy, and he stayed in his home behind him. He did not wake up with him. That's why the shadow is not along with him in the morning. But what was the main reason? Main reason was the shadow was not formed because the sun was not there in the sky in the morning. So this is the end of this poem. Tomorrow I will discuss the question answers and conclude the first chapter of yours. After that, I will give you a chapter end test. Before that, you need to repeat all the chapters that I have completed till now. Okay, then, thank you very much.